Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chasing the Sound. A Shot at Freedom is a book about life in Hawkins, Indiana. To most people, it's just an idyllic, well-kept American town. But for Eddie Munson, it's like living in an eternally terrifying mausoleum. Luckily, he only has a few months left to survive at Hawkins High School. And what is senior year really about, if not killing time between Dungeons & Dragons with the Hellfire Club and gigs with his band? Eddie meets Paige at the worst bar in town, who works a magical spell. She escapes Hawkins and builds a super cool life for herself working for a record producer in Los Angeles. Not only is she the definition of cool with incredible taste in music, but she may be the only person who truly appreciates him as a poet and not as the embodiment of evil. But the best part, she was offering him a chance to make something of himself, and all he needed was to get her a demo of Corroded Coffin's greatest hits. Just one recording cost money. Eddie didn't have any. But he was willing to do anything, even if it meant relying on his old man, Al Munson. His dad had just stumbled back into his life with another dubious scheme up his sleeve, but Eddie knew this was his only option to make enough money for long enough. It was a risk, but if it works, he'd finally have a one-way ticket out of Hawkins. 1. Stacy's doctor's exam room might have struck Terry as cold and clinical if she didn't have the rooms at the lab to compare it to. Since she did, the fact that there were paintings of old-fashioned doctor's bags and Norman Rockwell prints on the walls made it feel practically homey. The gown fabric was thicker. A box of tissues sat on a counter with jars of tongue depressors and cotton balls and Dum-Dums lollipops. A poster with the words "The Human Body" on the wall depicted a man's body with the organs and skeletal system diagrammed. Guess he won't be showing me where the baby is on that, Terry thought. A petite nurse had weighed her and given her a disapproving scowl when she said why she was there, then told her to change into the gown. Shed had Terry pee into a plastic cup and taken it away. "We use Wample's test here," she said. "It's faster than the others. I'll be back in 2 hours with the results." And so for 2 hours Terry had waited on a crinkling paper sheet for the official verdict to come. She wished she'd asked for a newspaper so she could read the latest developments around the Kent State shootings. A protest had gone badly wrong. 4 students had ended up dead, 9 injured, after guardsmen fired 67 rounds into the crowd in 13 seconds. There was no real indication of what had provoked the troops to shoot. Life could end so quickly. The door finally opened and the doctor came in, followed by the nurse. "I understand you're a friend of Stacy Sullivan's." The doctor frowned at her. His mushroom cloud of grey hair frizzed around his head, Einstein-like. He raised his hands to pull a pair of gloves on, and Terry noted that his hands were huge with hairy knuckles. She really hoped he didn't attempt to grope her. "That's right. The Sullivans are good people." He paused to make a teeth-sucking noise. "Stacy's a smart girl, too smart to get into trouble." So Stacy's doctor was, in fact, a total creep of all different sorts. "Good to know. Does that mean I am in trouble?" "Yes." He gazed at her balefully. "And I really shouldn't be seeing you without an adult or the father present. But then I guess if the father was present you wouldn't be here. He was deployed to Vietnam before I suspected. We're in a serious relationship. Unless you're in a married relationship, you shouldn't be in the state you're in now." He nodded for her to lie back. "Let's see how bad this situation is." Charming. She regretted coming here for a second, imagining their family doctor and how sympathetic he'd always been. Even just a fever was treated as cause for ice cream as soon as the girls felt strong enough for it. Had even come to her parents' funeral. Nervously, Terry scooted back and reclined on the table. She should be used to being poked and prodded at the mercy of doctors, but thighs was different. She'd done the math from various dates, and she could be very far along or not far at all. She and Andrew usually used protection, but a couple of times she'd been fairly certain of her cycle and they'd been careless. The nurse lifted her ankles and popped her feet into 2 cold metal stirrups at the end of the exam table. A sheet was placed over her lap. And then Terry closed her eyes and tried to be somewhere else while the doctor did the extremely unpleasant exam. "Why are all the tools so cold?" she asked. The doctor said in answer and sucked his teeth again. "You can sit up, miss." God, what a bedside manner. "Well," Terry prompted, "you're well into your 3rd trimester." The nurse gave her a disappointed look, as if Terry had engineered all this. But Terry was in shock. She hadn't expected this. She did the math in her head. November. All the way back in November, when Andrew had come to the dining hall in his mask that had been one of the careless nights after she'd bailed him out. That far along she wanted to be sure she understood right. "I'd estimate about 7 months along, and it's remarkable how little you're showing." He gave her a disapproving stare that mirrored the nurse's. "So I believe that you truly might not have known. However, you've been too careless for a more palatable solution to your problem. There are places you can go to finish the pregnancy and no one will ever know. You should do that." The use of the word careless so soon after she'd been thinking it herself stung. "No," Terry said. "I'm not giving her up. We don't know the sex of the baby. You're just developing an irrational attachment. Hormones will do that." God, was this where Stacy got the pregnancy hormones refrain? He went on, as if to impress his wisdom upon her. "You've made an error in judgment, and it's better for everyone if you let this baby go to a home where 2 loving parents can care for it." Terry wasn't entertaining suggestions on what she should do with her baby from this guy, but she could see she'd get nowhere if she argued. She needed actual information. "Tell me what I should know about the rest of the pregnancy. Can you tell if the baby is healthy?" "Everything seems normal." The doctor steepled his fingers and peered down his nose at her. His eyebrows were like untidy bushes. "I can recommend someone for you to see, but talk to your family. They'll tell you the same thing as me." When Terry glared at him, he continued, "You'll need to increase your caloric intake. The baby should start to take on more weight, and so should you. You may need to urinate more frequently. And you'll want to leave school. The semester's over next week. Thank God." She might get out of this without the school discovering and kicking her out for a morality infraction. Decent girls didn't get pregnant while they were unmarried. But it was almost comical how far shame was from Terry's concerns. She didn't care about that at all. She was too fixated on the monster who'd pumped her full of chemicals and what his goal had been. If he thought her baby was the next generation of anything to do with him, he was beyond mistaken. She almost asked the doctor for confidentiality, unable to trust that Brenna wouldn't find out about this appointment. Except 7 months. 7 months. Brenna must have known for how long and had continued to bring her there. He hadn't told her on purpose, just like Alice said, so he could keep dosing her. No, shame could wait, maybe forever. Her current main concern boiled down to one word: escape. There had to be a way to get out of this situation without anyone getting hurt. But first she needed to get word to Andrew that they were having a baby. "I'll see myself out," she said. 2. The dorm lobby must rival Grand Central. Terry couldn't be sure since she'd never been there. But this was how she pictured it from movies she'd seen, everyone speeding along double time because they had places to go. Finals were only a week away. This was a frenetic season of trying to cram in all the facts to make it through tests and papers, and enough fun to cover a summer spent back home. She had to wait for the phone, of course. 4 people were in line ahead of her. She pulled out her book but skimmed the lines without taking in much of it. The orcs still had Sam and Frodo. Eventually she gave up trying. Calling Andrew's mom was the best she could do for now. The hope was that Mrs. Rich could arrange for him to phone the dorm at a certain time. Terry had already rehearsed her line to him. So, how would you feel about forgetting this officially not together thing and getting engaged instead because we're having a baby this summer? When it was her turn, she dialed the number from memory and shifted from foot to foot while the phone rang. She almost gave up before Mrs. Rich answered. Another sniffle into the phone, like the other day. Terry barreled ahead. Mrs. Rich, it's Terry. I really need to talk to Andrew as soon as I can. Could you ask him to tell you a time he can call the dorm, and I'll make sure I'm standing by. I'm afraid the phone dropped to the floor. Seconds later, a male voice came on. Andrew's dad. Who is this? It's Terry, Andrew's girlfriend. I was hoping to get a message to him. I'm sorry, Terry. I'm sorry to have to tell you. Terry barely heard the rest. 3. Ken was in his room studying for a physics exam when the feeling came to him. A cold, dark certainty. A light dimming, then extinguishing. An overwhelming sense of loss in his world. He had asked for this answer time and again, and now that it was here he didn't want it. But in every fibre of his being he knew it as truth. Andrew was gone. 4. Alice knocked on Terry's dorm room door. She never felt entirely comfortable on the campus. At first she'd wanted to poke in every corner and elevator and determine how it was all put together, this world that had always felt so close and yet so secret. Now she knew people from this world, and it seemed both more and less like her own. On her way in, she'd taken the glances from curious snobs who didn't understand why someone dressed like her was on campus. She was here for her friend. The door swung open. Hey, Alice, Stacy said. Thanks. You're relieving Gloria here. Hi, Al, Gloria said. She sat beside Terry at a desk where they'd obviously been working hard. Books and papers were scattered around them. She just needs to go to her lit test, and then afterwards she has to drop this paper for a seminar. I wrote down the buildings. How are you doing? Alice asked. Don't ask me that, Terry said, obviously struggling to put on a brave face. They're writing the buildings where I'm supposed to go. Alice nodded. You got it. 0 questions about your emotional state. Ready to go ace some finals. Stacy had contacted Gloria and Alice after Terry got the news about Andrew, so the 3 of them could full court press to get Terry through finals. With her own to take, Stacy figured it'd work better if they took shifts. My girl is not getting kicked out of this school over some prehistoric nonsense. She's taking her tests, Shed said. Neither of them argued. They agreed. They would drag Terry to the end of this school year if it killed them. Gloria gathered her coat and purse. She paused beside Alice. How are you? She asked, keeping her voice down. Ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow was Thursday. I'm not going, Terry said, overhearing. To the lab tomorrow. I haven't figured out what to do yet. To stop it. Gloria and Alice exchanged a look. Stacy scoffed. Damn right you're not going back to that place. Why would you? You have enough to worry about. We probably should go, Gloria said. See how he takes it. You guys should really just all stop going, Stacy said. Let that guy Ken go. Alice looked at Gloria. Stacy could hardly understand that it was so much worse than her own experience. I'll see you tomorrow, Alice said to Gloria, who nodded and left. Terry would figure out what to do, or wake up and feel more like herself and less like the star of a tragedy, and when that happened she'd want to know that Carly was okay too. Alice could find out. She could also keep looking in the future for anything that might help them now. Let's get her shoes on, Stacy said. I'm right here, Terry said. I'm Terry, not her. Good. Stacy pointed to the wardrobe. Then pick out your own shoes and put them on. Alice let her struggle with the laces of her sneakers for 60 seconds, then took over. We don't stop to appreciate what a technological marvel these things must have been the first time someone laced fabric together, she said. Terry looked down at Alice and then threw her head back in laughter. My tennis shoes are marvels, and no, that's you. She kept laughing, and Alice was just glad to see that spark there. Terry would come back from this. They'd make sure of it. Wonders and marvels, Terry said, rubbing a hand across her belly. Her top was long and loose, no doubt chosen purposely for that reason by Stacy or Gloria. What a farce this is. Alice didn't know what Terry meant. Saying things like that, I bet you're going to knock this test out of the park. That's how I always figured college professors talked. Terry smiled at her, and Alice finished tying the shoes with a gentle tug. It's only been a few days. You'll get past this. I know, Terry said, almost dreamy. Her eyes were red but not as puffy as the day before. I remember from my folks' accident. You think it'll never get better, but days pass and you make a space to carry it with you. Alice nodded to Terry's stomach. Maybe you just don't have the room yet. That's already full. There's always room to carry your family. Heartwarming as this is, Stacy interrupted, you better get going or you'll be late. Alice dutifully escorted Terry to the English building, as indicated on Gloria's note. It had a small classics library in the lobby, and so, while Terry took her test, Alice hung out reading sections of books by flipping to a random page number she decided on beforehand. Andrew had been a good man. When Gloria called to tell her, Alice took it hard. But apparently it was Ken who'd taken it hardest. Well, besides Terry, she hadn't even realized Andrew and Ken knew each other well. It was sweet, but Ken couldn't help in any way except taking on diner shifts since he wasn't allowed on and off Terry's dorm floor. Besides, this was only for a couple more days, and then they'd be moving her home to live with her sister in their parents' house. Alice regretted that she didn't get to say goodbye to Andrew, but not as much as she hated him not knowing he'd have a child. Terry had decided not to tell his family, at least not yet. Her reasoning was that it might put them in danger from Brenner. Alice could guess part of her skipping the lab this week was a test to see what he'd do. She shivered, considering it. Cold, Terry asked behind her. You're done already? Alice slid the book in her hands, the Three Musketeers, back into place on the shelf. Let's get this paper turned in and then you can rest. I don't need to rest. Terry paused. I need to run an errand. Alone. I'll make it back on my own to the dorm, I swear. Alice considered. Terry was as clear-eyed as she'd been in days. Stacy will murder us all if anything happens to you, Alice said. Nothing's going to happen. I just need to stop by the library. What trouble could Terry get into at the library? How about I walk you there and then leave? Deal. But we're turning in the paper first per Gloria's orders. Terry hesitated. Y'all check on Carly tomorrow if you can. Am I doing the right thing not going? Alice had no idea. I'll let you know when I think you're getting it wrong. Thank you. That's probably the best promise anyone can make. She wished she could do a lot more. Fellowship of the Lab. Fellowship of the Lab, Terry repeated. She had her hand on her tummy again. We're family, too. Yes, Alice agreed. We are. Come on, kid sister. 5. Terry hadn't been alone in 3 days or nights. Someone was always with her. Stacy didn't do things by half measures when she bothered doing them, and Terry wasn't going to have very long alone here. She wandered through the library until she spotted the reference librarian she liked. Not so long a line today, and so Terry got into it and waited. There was no one else around, and the people who were in the library were busy with books spread across tables, finishing up projects. Terry felt like she carried a different world with her wherever she went now. These everyday concerns, the finals, politeness, tying her shoes, not crying in public, they all seemed meaningless in the face of her problems and the ache of losing Andrew. She wished she'd gotten to tell him he was going to be a father. She wished he'd gotten to be a father. But she had to think about the future. The librarian looked past her at first. Yes, what can I help you with? Hi, Terry said. You helped me out once before. I was wondering, maybe you could again. I have it's sort of an odd request. I don't know where to start. My favorite kind of request. She waved her fingers to bring it on. Go ahead. Terry swallowed. Then say there was a young woman in trouble and she needed to disappear. How would she go about it? Do you have anything about that? The librarian considered her, taking in her shapeless garments, her puffy face and its dark circles. We don't have any books, but I do specialize in information. She paused. Is this young woman in immediate danger? One of many questions of the moment. That's unclear. And does she need to disappear forever or just a short time? Terry hadn't thought that far ahead. Let's assume forever. Money is the big thing, the more the better, and she'd need a way to make it once she got away. The librarian kept her voice down. If someone is likely to look for this person, it'd be best if they thought she was, well, dead. Terry had already gotten that far in her head. People didn't search for the dead, though she couldn't figure out how to accomplish faking her own death. And besides that, who were you? If you did that, how would that work? Though you need a name to live. It's quite interesting, isn't it? The librarian spoke conspiratorially. I read a novel once where a man took the name of a boy born roughly at the same time as him but who died in childhood. Got away with it until he died. You'd just have to leave the area where the name would be likely to get recognized. Terry absorbed that. Where would I be able to look through obituaries from the early 1960s, see if there are any childhood deaths? This way. It'll help you pull a couple of years of newspapers. Childhood accidents. You may want to look for news stories, too. Might get a name there. For your purely hypothetical inquiry. Terry wondered if something awful had happened to the librarian that made her so willing to help. She wasn't going to ask. Ken arrived a handful of minutes after she'd told him to. He pulled out the chair at the table she'd taken up residence at and looked over at the newsprint in front of her. Dark, he said, eyeing the rows of obituaries. Or are you working on his? Terry hadn't even thought about it. She supposed his parents would write up his obituary for their town paper. Tears stung her eyes. The librarian circled by the table. Miss, she interrupted. Everything okay? Terry's head darted up as she realized the implication. The librarian was asking if Ken needed to be removed. Oh yes, it's fine. He's a friend. Not problem. Ken gave a sad smile. The problem is a person, though. The librarian nodded and moved on. Terry, Ken said. She hadn't seen him since the news of Andrew's death, but Stacy had told all her new friends and all Andrew's old ones. Ken had apparently taken it hard. I didn't realize you and Andrew knew each other much, she said. We didn't, Ken said. But we talked about you before he left. Shed had no idea. You did, I meddled. It was my idea for you to be officially broken up. I just felt like something was going to happen that would separate you, and maybe it would make it easier. I should've left it alone. My mother told me never to meddle in big things. Ken, that didn't matter. It was for show. It did help. But hell always be with me. In more ways than one. Terry barked a laugh. She figured the librarian would let it slide, but quieted down anyway. What is all this? Ken asked. Would you want to see me? I'm figuring out how to disappear. But I can't leave it all unfinished. I'm working on how we do this. Get away from Brenner for good. Shut down what he's doing. I just wanted you to know that you can tell me if you get a certainty that I should know about. I can't lose anyone else. I'll try, Ken said, but remember, there are a lot of people who don't want to lose you either. They may have to, she said. I may have to go. And if it keeps everyone safe, that's fine. Understand? She could tell he didn't. But Terry had already started gathering what money she could. What she'd accumulated from the lab since the bail, and from the diner. She'd fill the fellowship in once she had the details worked out. They might toss her a few bucks. The baby kicked and she touched her stomach. Can I feel? Ken asked. Terry glanced around, but they were alone in this corner of the library. Go ahead. She placed Ken's hand on the center of her mildly swollen tummy and the baby kicked again. I came up with a name, she said. I read this National Geographic article at the doctor's in the waiting room. It was about this woman, Jane Goodall, who studies chimpanzees in Tanzania. Not another science experiment, Ken said with a groan. She's different. She doesn't use numbers for her subjects. She names them. I'm calling the baby Jane. Terry paused as little Jane kicked again. It was like she'd been hiding, and now that her presence had been revealed she was determined to make herself known. Constantly. Terry didn't mind. I like the name Jane, too, so you better be right about the sex. Feel that, Ken said, and then removed his hand. That's a brave Spitfire girl just like her mama in there. She can't wait to get out into the world. How could I be wrong? Sex. Doctor. Brenner's day had been frustrating. Visiting 8 wasn't helping. Had brought a packet of Hostess cupcakes for her and not even made her work for them. And still she sulked. Children were maddening. And well, so were adults. Just in entirely different ways. I want to see my friend, she said. Terry didn't come today. He quietly fumed about that, her nerve at not showing up. He'd have to get her back on track after he'd received the call about her doctor's visit. He assumed she would be panicking and he hadn't been altogether taken off guard by her weak attempt to buck his authority. Even he had been surprised to hear about the boyfriend. Ah well, one less complication to worry about down the road. He supposed he should have seen that coming when he arranged the draft solution. He knew just the leverage to apply now. I don't mean Terry 8 said. The one like me. Who was she talking about? There's no one like you, Doctor. Brenner said. Not yet. I'm working on a friend that will be. Terry is. Not her. I haven't seen the monsters, but I bet they're here. I need to talk to her. 8 was in a mood. The kind where she wouldn't give up. The monsters Brenner searched for. Why, that rang a bell. Oh yes, the mechanic subject who responded with such interesting panache to her electroshock treatments. Alice Johnson. Numbers were so much easier to keep track of than names. 8. Have you talked with someone here besides Terry? The girl studied the ceiling, sucking chocolate frosting off her index finger. Doctor. Harks and Benjamin, and she listed the other orderlies and staff members. And you, Papa? He hid his true reaction. No one else. I won't tell. I promised. She whispered the words and he sensed fear within her. Good. He could work with that. We've been over this. The only promises that matter are the ones you make to me. She shook her head, tossing her black hair from left to right. It doesn't feel right. Let me be the judge. Papa, no. She ran for the door and out into the hallway. He followed her, walking fast. There was no escape for her here. No need to worry. His feet clicked across the tile as he steadily pursued her, past the empty room where Terry Ives should be, incubating what was to be his finest achievement. Then they passed the room with the flaky man Ken, followed by the most promising of their interrogation research subjects, Gloria, and finally Alice. 8 stood in front of Alice, talking fast and gesturing wildly. So that was who she meant. He put his hand on the doorknob and turned it. Alice's mouth fell open as Carly disappeared again. I know you're in here, 8, he said, entering the room. Come out now. 8, Alice asked. He raised his eyebrows. The irony of these women and their concern over names. Carly, I'm not angry. What was it 8 had said that her other friend was like her? Was Alice hiding secrets? Were her monsters real? You're friends with Terry Ives, yes, Doctor? Brenner asked instead of his actual questions. Yes, she said, and the words rushed out. She's going through a hard time. You shouldn't worry about her not being here. You should just leave her alone. Let her live in peace. How sweet. He took a step further into the room. 8, come out now. Honey, you'd better do what he says, Alice said, spooked. Are there monsters here now? He asked her. Alice only nodded. She means me. He laughed. No wonder 8 liked her so much. She'd probably told the girl he was a monster. I'm not a monster, he said. But if you want to think of me as one, go right ahead. Carly, come out now, we're going. Bye, Alice 8 sang as the door opened once more. But she reappeared and turned in the threshold, hesitating. You're sure the monsters aren't here now? Alice didn't seem to want to answer. But when 8 refused to leave, she did at last. Sure. How long has she been coming to see you, Doctor? Brenner asked Alice. She held her chin high. Not long. I won't say anything about what she can do. Oh, I know. And we would know the moment you did. Well, be going now. Bye, Miss Johnson. Doctor. Brenner caught 8 and took her shoulder, so she couldn't give him the slip again that easily. In the hall, he asked her, so that's your friend? She's like me. She sees things. But she says they're not now. They're from the future. Monsters in the future. He wasn't sure he believed it, but suddenly he knew exactly how to get Terry-eyed back where she belonged, and he'd keep the mechanic close enough to learn if any of the secrets she'd been keeping were of value. 7. Terry hefted a last box of clothes to carry up the stairs at home, only to have Becky pluck it away from her. You need to stop lifting so many heavy things, her sister said. It wasn't that Terry actually wanted to carry the box. It was the principle of the thing. And you need to stop fussing. Impregnant, not mortally wounded. Becky frowned at her. Come on, you're taking a nap. But I want to talk to you first. Oh, no. A talk. Help someone help. Terry's spirits had marginally improved. She'd managed to pass her finals, and Stacy had overseen her packing and moving so efficiently that Terry barely lifted a finger. Instead, she just carefully curated a box or two, which in her mind she called the disappearing boxes. Why pack twice in close succession? It comforted her to have a worst-case scenario contingency plan. Not that she'd figured out the making money part of it. She had a fake name picked out if she needed one. Delia Monroe, who died of TB at age 6. Running might have to be enough. Becky lugged the second of the disappearing boxes up the sturdy wooden stairs without even knowing it. Terry trailed her, taking her time on the steps. Now that she knew she was pregnant and couldn't chalk being tired or achy or cranky up to life, she seemed more aware of all the nuisance pains. Sis, Terry said, I never told you how grateful I'm you didn't lecture me. And I'm not just saying that to stave off a lecture, if that's about to happen. They reached the top of the landing. Becky kept walking and put down the box with the rest on the floor in Terry's room. All her comforting pictures from childhood, the family portraits, the patchwork quilt her aunt had made when her mother was pregnant with her. She'd already transferred the Polaroid of her and Andrew to the vanity, right over her jewelry box with its tiny ballerina. Becky had already started decorating the nursery. It was set to be across the hall. It were here and not gone. Once they'd been gone long enough, she could chance coming back for Carly. Becky turned and put both her hands on Terry's shoulders so she could look her in the face. Terry, you're my sister. What am I going to do, turn you out on the street? I'm not going to lecture you. Andrew was a good man. I didn't expect you to wait until marriage, and she hesitated. And Becky swiped a sweaty hair back from Terry's forehead. Terry returned the favor. We need iced tea, Becky said. That's not what you were going to say. Spit it out. And it's probably good you didn't. Wait. You were in love. I know y'all treasure this child. Y'all be a good mom. They'll help you. You don't have to do it all on your own. Terry pictured that, and it didn't seem like the worst future. The two of them in their parents' house raising a little girl together. It would liven the place up like Andrew's presents had at Christmas. Funny how 8 months ago it would have seemed a fate worse than death to end up in spinsterhood with Becky. But there were far, far worse things out there. Living on the run with her child, for instance, which was just as real a possibility. There were worse people than sensible older sisters to have in your corner. The phone rang in the hall, shrill and loud, jarring them out of the moment. I'll get that, Becky said. You lay down and rest. That's an order. Drill sergeant. But Terry stayed standing to see who it was. Ives residence, Becky answered. This is Becky speaking. A pause while she listened to whoever was on the other end. Doctor. Brenner, no, I'm not familiar with you. How do you know Terry? That hadn't taken long. Terry crept out into the hallway and put her fingers to her lips in a SHHH gesture as she approached Becky. She gently pressed Becky's curls over her shoulder so she could hold the receiver between their heads where they could both hear. "How's Miss Ives feeling? I understand she's had quite a shock, but I was hoping to get her back here soon for some tests." His voice alone was as good as a direct threat. Her pulse kicked up. "She's feeling better," Becky said noncommittally. "I'm so glad to hear it. When can we see her?" Terry tensed, and Becky must have noticed. "I doubt she'll be up to that anytime soon." Becky didn't mention the pregnancy because she didn't think it was anyone's official business. There was no way to change the fact that Terry was about to be an unwed mother, but Becky's philosophy was that by emphasizing the father had died in the war, questions could be limited. It didn't have to be a scarlet letter tattooed on her. Terry hadn't bothered to explain that adultery wasn't what the scarlet letter signified. "I'm sorry to hear that." He paused. "Might I speak with her?" Terry wanted to shake her head no. But it wasn't fair of her to ask Becky to play intermediary. It was time to stop hiding. She could learn as much from this conversation as he could. She took the phone. "It's me. Terry, I'm so sorry to hear about your young man," he said, smooth as if they had an audience. "And I understand congratulations are in order." She expected to feel icy terror, but instead hot rage boiled through her. "As if you didn't know when you were." Becky was giving her a startled look, and so she didn't say it. "Pumping me full of drugs while I was pregnant. The child is going to be exceptional. Our child is going to be exceptional, the one we've made together. Isn't that what every parent wants?" She could hardly breathe. "You have no claim to my child. Mine and Andrew's." He added, "It's all been for your own good, for the good of everyone." She wanted to smash the receiver into the wall, but she kept her voice steady when she spoke and got out the few words she could. "No, it wasn't. It was what you wanted for your awful experiments. That's not the same thing." "Terry, are you really thinking about not coming back? I know 8 Carly would be the poorer for it. You forced the issue. Think of your friends. I just learned the most interesting thing about one of them." Now there it was. The terror beneath her rage. "What are you talking about?" "I know about your friend Alice. I filed emergency commitment paperwork today." No. What did he mean he knew about Alice? Terry had always intended to stop the whole thing, but if he knew about Alice's ability, he'd already filed the paperwork. He'd never let her go. A man like that wanted nothing more than to see the future, so he could do his best to control it. "Leave her alone." Terry, Brenner went on. "I only want to help all of you reach your full potential. I can even take the pain of Andrew's death away from you. Wouldn't that make this easier?" Terry couldn't speak. Rage filled her. "Y'all see incorrect. Remember the day of your parents' funeral, the first memory we explored. Revisit it in your mind. The pain is gone. Yes, I did that. Let me help you." Terry thought of the church, of her mother in her coffin, her father in his. Usually it came as nightmares, too painful for her waking mind to live in that sorrow. But here, now, she felt only a dull ache. "You are evil. Leave us alone." Brenner went on. "I'm afraid I can't. I won't let you leave. Breathe. Y'all find a way out of this for everyone. Somehow." Despair nearly crushed her. What if she couldn't? She hung up the phone and stared at it. Becky had her hands at her hips. "What in the world? I can tell y'd love to climb through the phone. You're not up to any experiment right now." What to do? The truth would trouble her sister, but Terry was through lying. "I think I need to tell you about the Hawkins laboratory," Terry said. "About what they've been doing to me there. To all of us. And Beck, he knew I was pregnant with Andrew's baby. For how long I don't know, but long enough. But first, I have to make a call." "What do you mean?" "Just wait." Terry hunted out the sheet that Stacy had made with everyone's home and dorm numbers, then picked up the phone and dialed Gloria. "Gloria, hi, can you go get Alice and bring her here? I'll call Ken too." "We need to talk." "Of course," Gloria said. Terry gave her the address, then she phoned Ken. He didn't even make a quip about already being on his way. Then she walked into her bedroom, where Becky waited for her. The presence of the disappearing boxes had lost their comfort, but her sister still was one. And that gave her the beginnings of an idea, a remedy for her despair after talking to Brenner. They had a fellowship. They had allies. They had abilities. Brenner had ambition and cruelty and, yes, a government installation at his command. She'd never let him have her child. And she sure as hell wasn't letting him have Alice, either. Or abandoning Carly there. She wanted to leave him with what he deserved. Nothing and no one. This was a war for the future, and she didn't mean to lose anyone else. 8. Within an hour, everyone had assembled at Terry and Becky's. "Do you mind if we go upstairs talk in private?" Terry asked Becky when Ken came through the door. Alice and Gloria had arrived moments before. "I'll make some brownies," Becky said. Terry hated keeping anything secret from Becky, now that she knew most of the truth, but it was safer this way. Becky had been born skeptical. The idea of people with special abilities or the government developing them would push her to the edge of what she could believe. She had had a hard enough time with the revelation that Dr. Brenner had pumped Terry full of acid for months, knowing she was pregnant. She believed Terry only intended to go back to the lab to demand a payoff for her trauma. Raising children was expensive. And so up the stairs they went. Terry had been scrambling to come up with ideas, and she had a few. She'd meant for them to go to her room, but Alice turned into the nursery in progress instead. That was fine. Terry followed and flipped on the light. "Becky's already been putting it together," she said. There was a second-hand cradle from a girl Becky went to high school with, and a blue and red clown mobile dangling above it. "I've never met a kid who was into clowns, but this is cute," Gloria said, giving the mobile a jiggle so the various pieces rotated. "Little baby Jane will probably love it." "Everyone loves clowns," Ken said. "I'm terrified of them." "Alice, I'm afraid I've got bad news," Terry said. "Dr. Brenner called here." Maybe, just maybe, if she was able to convince the others of her completely off-the-rails plan and pull it off, that idyllic vision of raising her child in peace would come true. There was one thing for certain, though. They couldn't discuss it openly here. No way Martin Brenner wasn't eavesdropping on her. She was counting on it. Terry grabbed a notebook where Becky had been taking measurements for curtains and flipped to an empty page in the middle. She held up a finger and her friends surrounded her as she wrote them a note. "Go along with what I'm about to say, they're listening. Real plan later." "He threatened me," she said. "Said I have to come back." "Oh, Gloria, as cool as a spy." "Soon. I'm going back this week, but I need your help with something. All of you. Alice, he's on to you." Alice fidgeted, her eyes gravitating to the notebook as Terry scribbled in it. "What?" Terry wrote, "Would you be willing to go stay with your cousins in Canada for a while, as long as needed?" Alice nodded, her brows drawn together. "We're all in danger." Terry took a breath. "I want to get proof once and for all of what's going on there. It's time to take Brenner and his project down. If I can get files from his office, I can leak them to someone, not just to the Gazette, but the New York Times or the Washington Post maybe. Someone who can do something to get those kids out of there and shut it down. And then we never go back there again." "Where do we come in?" Gloria asked. Terry looked at Ken. "Do you think we can do this?" Ken said, "I have a good feeling." "Then that's all I need to hear," Terry said. "Tough luck, Brenner. Please let him buy this." And she launched into outlining her fake plan. "Gloria, do you think you can trip a fire alarm?" "Yes," she said. "No problem." Terry went through several false elements. Gloria would create a distraction, Ken would help if needed, and then Terry would sneak into Brenner's office and steal his files. Easy. Simple. Not the actual plan at all. "What about me?" Alice asked. Terry wrote another note. "We'll discuss the real plan outside, later. You're going to disable the electroshock machine so no one can tell. Hoping Carly will do the rest." Alice nodded. Hard knocks sounded at the door downstairs. Terry left the room and stopped at the top of the stairwell, the others joining her. Becky answered it, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Hello, who are you?" A group of uniformed men stood on the doorstep. Terry thrust the notebook in her hands at Ken and said, "Hide it." He disappeared. The man in front at the door said, "We're here for Alice Johnson. I have paperwork that authorizes us to take her into the custody of Hawkins National Laboratory." Before Terry could process what was happening, uniformed men barged in and up the stairs. "Wait a second," Becky protested below, but they were fast. The leader advanced on Terry and another said, "Careful with the pregnant one. We have a message for you," the man said. "The way you're supposed to this week." He moved her out of the way and took Alice. "I don't want to go," Alice said. "Commitment paperwork," Terry said, realizing. "He said he did it." "Alice, don't worry. We'll see you soon. I promise." "I don't want to go," Alice said again as Ken returned. The three of them watched helplessly while Alice was carted down the stairs, her eyes big as stars, and put into a van. The men drove away into the night. Terry prayed the real plan she'd come up with could save her. 1. Terry sat on her bed. It was early Thursday morning, and their plans were as ready as they could be. She'd leave to meet Gloria and Ken in a few minutes. But she wanted to know something first about herself, her own capability. She closed her eyes and put her hands on her belly, and she forced herself to relax and breathe deep. No drugs, no monitor watching her, nothing but her. Go deeper, she coaxed herself, and her surroundings faded. She walked into the black void, water beneath her feet. She'd almost given up when Alice appeared before her. Her friend lay on a cot, not seeing Terry's approach. She wore her hospital gown, dark circles under her eyes. She looked haunted. "Alice," she sent the thought out as strongly as she could. "We're coming. Be ready." Alice said nothing. There was no way to know if she'd seen or heard. When Terry opened her eyes, the lamp at her bedside blinked on and off. She was ready. 2. Brenner spent the day in his office in a state of excitement. Terry Ives had such high hopes for her plans that dashing them might be enough to make her cooperative in the long term. She'd already proven more stubborn than he'd expected. He almost respected that, but he couldn't truly respect anyone who engaged in such futile actions. As if he'd allow everything he intended to build here to be destroyed. Everything he'd worked for up to now. Others might not understand his commitment to the project, but that didn't matter. He didn't need their understanding of it, he only needed time to prove he was correct. The only thing that would be shut down today was a rebellion. A tap came on his office door, so the security officer said, "Yes. Report. Ives and Flowers have arrived," he went on. "The man didn't show up today. Ken. Maybe he'd stop coming altogether. His results had been lackluster." "Thank you." Brenner didn't immediately go to meet Terry, but took a detour to one of the pharmaceutical laboratories on the second level of the complex. He'd given specific instructions to the assistant director who ran it. The lab was always a sterile, quiet flurry of activity. Men and women at large, complex machines producing a variety of chemical substances to alter the brain or the body. It was for the latter that he came today. "Is it ready for me, Doctor?" Brenner asked. The lab-coated man nodded. He was pale, as if he hadn't seen the sun in ages, like a committed staffer should be. "It'll take a couple of hours to work, give or take," he said, and produced a wide syringe with a cap. "Perfect," Brenner said, accepting the syringe and stashing it in his pocket. He caught himself humming tunelessly on the way to Terry Ives' room, winding through the labyrinth of hallways that formed his domain. He lingered at the window and watched her. She sat tall, waiting. Soon he'd break her spirit. But first he'd have some fun. "I see you kept your word," he said, letting himself in. "I'm a little surprised. Your friend is doing fine here. I detected some serious hostility when we spoke." She gave him a fake smile. "Not all of us can afford to be good liars. Such spirit. Would her child be the same?" He had intended to take his time, but now that he was here, he found he couldn't wait. He removed the syringe. Hold out your arm, please. What's this? She frowned. I won't take more acid. I figured that much. He shook his head. That's one of the reasons I didn't tell you about your condition. This is an injection to help with the pregnancy. It won't hurt you or our child. He saw the way she stiffened at his use of the term. But it was their child, as much as hers. Why would I trust you to give this to me? He gestured, and the orderly let himself in. Hold her, Brenner said. Terry resisted, but the man forced her to her feet. He pinned her arms to her sides. Brenner inserted the needle into her skin at the elbow, pressing the plunger. Solving problems was simple when you had access to the right tools. What else do you want with me? She asked, shaking off the orderly. That's it for today. I just wanted to give you the injection and take some blood work. He returned her fake smile to her. You can just wait for your friends to finish. That's it, she asked. You're going to let us leave. Why don't you trust me, Terry? At that, she smirked. Do I still have a brain in my head? I do. No, I don't trust you. Just rest, he said. Don't tax yourself. I will. She reclined on the bed, play-acting like a child. Not because you said, I'll be back later. I can't wait. He didn't like giving her the last word, but it wasn't really. He went back to his office to wait for her to spring her silly little scheme. 3. Terry would risk going to see Carly in person if she had to, but Brenner might figure it all out too soon. Now she was confident she could reach the void without his help, without anything but herself. She wanted to know what Head put in her arm, but was also relieved not to. She'd have to be content with knowing Head never hurt a child he considered his. Not hurt in that way. Only in the way of imprisoning and turning them into a lab rat for his own sick purposes. Terry sat and thought about each stage of the plan and how easily it could not work, and how perfectly they'd have to execute it. She thought of Andrew and what his last minutes must have been like, and if she'd ever find out for sure. She vowed to finish her book when she got out of here and find out what happened to the ring, and Frodo and Sam. She wondered if Gloria was prepared. If Ken was. Alice. They had to get this right. But they needed Carly for it to work at all. Please let her be there, this one last time. Getting to the nowhere everywhere place took no time. Terry closed her eyes and took a step inside her mind, and darkness surrounded her, her feet splashing soundlessly. Carly appeared immediately. Terry, I'm happy to see you. Terry had to laugh. The words were delivered in such a tone of surprise. I'm glad to see you too. I need to talk to you about something very important. I need your help, and so does Alice. And we want to help you. Carly was suspicious. Does Papa know? He can never know. I've said that before, but this time I mean it. Carly pursed her lips. Papa wants to hurt me and my baby. Terry patted her tummy. You're growing a baby. Carly's expression was awed. I am, and he wants to hurt her. He's also going to hurt Alice. He could do great harm to her. Mess with things he shouldn't. Carly looked up at Terry and her bottom lip trembled. Because of me, she whispered. Because I told. You didn't mean to, I know. Terry bent and put an arm around the child. But this time, no one can know. It has to be a secret. Forever. We have to keep Alice safe. The future safe. Agreed. Carly nodded. Good. I need you to do an illusion, but only if you think you can control it. It'll just be small. I can try. Her voice was soft. Okay. That's good. It was a gamble, but what wasn't? Do you think you can go to Alice's room and make it look like she's deep asleep, so deep she's not even breathing? No matter what happens, can you keep it up? Carly hesitated. Then she stomped. But I don't want Alice to go. You can come with us. Leave your papa and be free. Terry had no idea how she'd react to the suggestion, but she'd like nothing more than to take Carly with them, if there was any way to do it. I can't. Carly was solemn. There are monsters coming here. I can't leave my friend. Her friend, the one who Brenner had promised her. Terry put her hand on her belly. Head promised her Terry's child as a friend. Oh, how did she not see it before now? The little girl in Alice's visions with 011 on her arm. No, it can't happen that way. Please, Carly, we're your friends. The girl looked near tears. I can't leave. Papa won't allow it. Terry had been afraid of this. She'd have to go on with the plan and come back for Carly, much as it hurt her heart to leave the girl behind. Even briefly, Jane kicked inside her. I'll be back for you. Okay, as soon as I can. So you think you can do this? But Alice won't come back, will she? Terry stared into the little face. No, she can't. Alice will have to be gone. Forever. I want her to stay. Carly stomped her foot again. Carly, Terry said, I understand. I want her to stay too. But you don't want her to be hurt, and neither do I. Right. Right. But it was grumbled. How could she make the girl understand? You know how you remember your mom, how she's inside here. Terry put her hand to her head, then her heart. Yes. That's because she's your family. Friends are like your maid family, and so you keep them with you even when you're not together anymore. Even if you forget parts of them because you get older. We hold our friend families close. But we don't have to be with those people for them to be a part of us. We carry them with us all the time. Like she did Andrew. So Alice will always be with me, Carly asked after thinking it over. And so will I. I'll help you. And I won't tell. I'll protect you. Carly smiled. We're family. Terry bent to kiss her forehead. To her surprise, Carly let her. I won't forget about you, Terry said. Ever. I promise. Now go. Remember, make it look like Alice is deep asleep, not breathing. But don't let on it's you doing it, no matter what. No matter what. Carly capered away into the black, and not a moment too soon. Terry followed a sound out of the darkness back to the exam room. An alarm. Gloria. It was time. 4. Gloria had wanted to at least put one over on Dr. Green, but had phoned it in even more than usual. After giving her a tab of acid which she did not take but pocketed and a sheet full of coordinates to memorize, he left. No orderly with her, nothing. This was her big chance to live out some adventure. She was going to play her comic book moment to perfection. She even got to pick the lock using the methods Alice had taught her. She went into the hallway and found the fire alarm. Then she pulled it. Nothing happened. This fire alarm was disabled, so Terry had been right about the eavesdropping on her room. But they couldn't have disabled them all. Not even mad scientists would risk something so foolish in a facility like this. A fire could destroy everything. And so Gloria's heart pounded, blood drumming in her ears, as she got her wish for a more difficult task. She hurried up the hall looking for another alarm to trigger. The hunt took precious minutes. She worried she was messing up the timing of everything, but finally, at last, she saw one up ahead. Right past an orderly with a cleaning cart. If we're doing this, we're doing this. She shoved him out of the way with an excuse me and then pulled the alarm. There was a half-second of silence when she thought she'd failed again, but then the blissful sound of obnoxious sirens filled the air. I did it. Just like Jean Grey. The orderly had recovered and grabbed for her, but Gloria was too quick. She ducked his arm and raced back the way she'd come. Her work wasn't done. It turned out that Alice had given them the more covert entrance they needed in her electroshock wanderings. And so Gloria made for the rendezvous point on the north side of the building to meet Ken. She hoped her alarm would work as expected, confusing the reaction to his grand entrance. Which should be happening any minute now. Any minute. She laughed a little as she ran. She'd never realized it before. Superheroes were insane. 5. Ken had never considered himself a car guy. Had grown up around them. His dad was a car guy and had wanted to go to auto shows and discuss prices and spoilers and paint jobs. But it wasn't Ken's thing, although had enjoyed their trip to the brickyard enough. Alice and Gloria's interest in the cars had almost been strong enough to transfer, like rubbing a pencil over an object to imprint it. If Ken had been a car guy, he doubted he'd have felt even a hint of regret for Terry's poor car as he drove closer to Hawkins. It wasn't much of a car, a not insignificant reason for its being made into a sacrificial lamb. But because he was Ken and decidedly still not a car guy, he told the old Ford how sorry he was that it had to end this way. "You're a good car that has served Terry well. You're not showing off. You're not too speedy. But you've done your job with dignity. And now you will be a warrior chariot." For Ken was driving it into battle. The chain link fence appeared on the left, floodlights within, and Ken grinned. He wasn't all that good a driver either, due to the lack of being a car guy, and so he said a silent prayer of thanks for the certainty that today was not the day he died. The gate came closer and he took the turn toward it at a screech, gunned the engine, and hit the horn. The soldiers didn't move fast, but they were out of the way by the time he plowed into the gate and took it down. The car shook off its remains and kept going. "Good job, Nellie." So what if he'd named Terry's car it was a good car? On Ken went up the drive toward the lab, blowing through the wooden barrier at checkpoint 2, honking the horn madly the whole time. Sirens had started up almost immediately and people sprang into action, but they were amassing behind Ken, not in front of him. He drove around the side of the building to a sub-level entrance that Alice had seen in her visionary explorations and screeched to a stop. Gloria burst through the door and stopped, holding it ajar. "Where is she?" he asked. "Coming," she said, propping something against the door to keep it open. "Right behind me. I hope him headed down. Shouldn't be long." As the first men with guns showed up, Ken hoped so, too. 6. Brenner perked up when a person's shadow approached his office door. An alarm echoed at a sanity-destroying volume throughout the building. It was about time she made it up here. "Why, Miss Ives, what a sir," he started, but dropped off when he saw the new security officer instead. "What is it?" "We have a situation, sir," the man said, speaking loud to be heard over the alarm. "Which is?" Brenner got up, taking his jacket off the arm of his chair and putting it on. "We've got a fire alarm and a threat outside the building." Ken had come after all. "Shut down the alarm, neutralize the threat." "He's a civilian, sir," the guard continued. "But the most worrisome thing is Miss Ives. She was on her way to your office, like you said she would be, but she saw something. She saw something and stopped. She's in Alice Johnson's room. You better come. She's upset. It's Doctor. Parks is upset too." And Subject 8. Brenner had been prepared to gloat at how they'd known and foiled Terry's plans. He wanted her upset, but he didn't want her in Alice Johnson's room. Something had gone very wrong indeed for her to abandon her plan. He followed the security officer. There was nothing Brenner hated more than surprises. Nothing except losing. 7. Terry took a step closer to Alice, holding off Dr. Parks. Alice was slumped on the floor beside the electroshock machine in her exam room. Not moving. Not breathing. Carly cried beside her, as she had every time Terry had seen her do an illusion. "She's not moving," the child wailed, and Terry watched as she wiped a stream of blood from one side of her nose. Her upset was real, but so far her illusion was simple and it held. "Good girl." "Alice," Terry said. "No, not Alice." Electrodes were still fixed to Alice's temples where she lay. The dial on the machine cranked way up. Terry had changed back into her street clothes, which had allowed her to stash a kitchen knife she'd smuggled in from home in her pocket. She would wait until it was needed. Terry had figured the illusion had to be significant, but nothing that Brenner would see coming, or that would be so big he'd realize they intended to fool him. He didn't believe that Carly was capable of control, but Terry knew that no one understood their capabilities until they had to, especially not a child. It was a small thing for her, so much smaller than the flames. But it wouldn't last forever. Alice had to disappear. If this worked, she would. Because Brenner would believe she was dead until he didn't need to anymore. This had to work. Terry knew he'd never let any of them go otherwise. "You have to let us take care of her, Doctor," Parks said. I said leave her alone, Terry commanded. She stood over Alice and gently brushed her hair behind her ear. The illusion maintained. She's dead. When she caught Carla's eye, the girl sobbed harder. By all appearances genuine. Oh, Carly, it'll come back for you. If Terry hadn't known that what she was seeing was fake, she'd have gone out of her mind. When she'd passed Alice's room, then doubled back, the view was tragic. Doctor Parks was crying too, and trying to pry Carly away from Alice's form. What is this, Doctor? Brenner said as he walked in, but even he stopped short. She changed the setting on the machine, Doctor. Parks said quietly. It was too much. You did this. Terry stood and leveled a finger at Dr. Brenner and put every accusation she had against him into her voice. You're the reason Alice is dead. You killed her. Calm down, Brenner said. Maybe she can be revived. He didn't believe it. She could tell. She's dead. She's not coming back, and we're not staying here. We're not doing this anymore. Alice stayed where she was, playing dead and limp. Why, Doctor? Brenner asked. Why not just have a nice sedative? I planned to take files from your office, but I think Alice, she choked on a sob, is all I need to make sure you never hurt my child or my friends again. I'll talk to her family. They'll keep it quiet as long as you leave us all be. You can try to keep us here, but we'll know the truth. I won't rest until I escape this place, and I will make sure the world knows you killed her, knows everything you've done here. Well, make sure of it. Terry, be careful. Think of your child. I am. Terry removed the knife from her pocket and showed it to him, gleaming and silver. Now I'm leaving here with Gloria and Ken, and you are not going to follow. You killed Alice. And if you don't want everyone to know, you will stay where you are and let us go. You know I'm stubborn. You also know you can't risk hurting my child. If anyone lays a hand on me, I'll use this. She waved the knife. On myself if I have to. Brenner stood uncertainly and blood roared through Terry's head. What did they do if he wouldn't let them go? What then? I loved Alice. Let them go, Papa, Carly said through sobs. Terry hadn't expected that, but she'd take it. Get out of my way, she ordered. Brenner still didn't move. It's too bad about her, he said, nodding to Alice. Such lost potential is always sad. There's so little of it in the world. We may still learn from her yet. The two of them were at a standoff. Terry facing down Brenner. Him standing his ground. What did she do if he refused? We're going, Terry said. His words made her feel sick, but what they implied was exactly what they'd planned for. Fine, he said, and then he stepped aside. Don't hurt the child. Terry didn't wait for a change of mind. She stumbled past him, gripping the knife handle, expecting at any moment he'd reach out and grab her. But he didn't. Let her go, he called to the officers in the hall, who backed away instantly. Tell everyone to let them go. Gloria met her halfway up the hall, dressed in orderly scrubs and with longer than usual hair. Did it work? Gloria asked. It's working, Terry said. Carly did a good job. Ken ready. Like the cavalry, Gloria said. Be right back. Terry didn't turn around to see Gloria go ahead for the last phase of the plan. 8. Gloria had hidden a gurney up the hall from Alice's room, and she retrieved it now. She'd even brought a wig from her mother's special occasion closet to better disguise herself. She needn't have worried. Dr. Parks was in tears, and Dr. Brenner was already gone. Carly too. Gloria didn't have much time. Motionless on the floor, Alice looked dead. Mom, Gloria said, lowering her voice's register, I'm here to take the body to the morgue for dissection. The word dissection made her want to throw up. Dr. Parks waved her hand for her to do what she must. Gloria had trouble heaving Alice up, so it was a good thing Parks was distracted. Corpses didn't usually help get themselves onto gurneys. Gloria pulled a sheet over Alice and rolled the gurney into the hallway, where she immediately sped up. Hang on, Gloria said. She saw Alice's fingers grip the sides of the table under the sheet. Where are we going? She asked. Out of this place. Sounds good to me, Alice said. Just as they'd planned, Ken had backed the car up to the entrance. Terry had left the door propped wide open. Stay down, Gloria said, pushing the gurney toward the door. Okay, now you can get up. The car hood will hide you. Get in the trunk. The trunk, Alice said, slipping off and to her feet in a crouch. It's not for long. Alice sighed and did as she'd been told. Gloria shut the hood and climbed into the back. Ken and Terry were playing up their distraught reactions to Alice's supposed death. Security officers had made a perimeter, but they were staying back. Ken gunned the motor and she heard someone calling. He said, "Let them leave, no one shoot." "We ready?" Ken asked from behind the wheel. "We are ready," Terry said. And, as he gunned the motor, she said, "Bye, Hawkins. If we're lucky, see you never. Except when I come back for Carly." Terry had no intention of allowing Brenner to keep on with his monstrous work, but first she had to get Alice to safety. She had to see baby Jane into the world. Plan fake Alice's death and bluff our way out had worked. 9. They didn't slow down until they'd left Hawkins far in the rearview mirror. They stopped off at Unionville's Greyhound station, a little outside Bloomington, not far from Larrabee. After they'd released Alice from the trunk, Ken handed her the bus ticket he'd bought earlier. "I can't believe you got me out of there." Alice shook her head in wide-eyed wonder. "Me either." Gloria mind wiping her brow. Alice's eyes got watery. "I'm going to miss you guys." Terry couldn't go down that road right now or she'd cry, too. "No tears, we did it. This is only until I can expose what he's doing there. In the meantime, y'all be safe. Do we need to check in with your folks?" Alice said, "My cousins will call them once I make it. I've come up with a code for them to use. Alice would made a great spy." "Good." Terry nodded to Ken. "Suitcase." He went back to the car and dragged out Terry's big suitcase from the back seat. Gloria had been wedged in beside it. Terry had packed it with the contents of the disappearing boxes and left out a dress for Alice to change into. They were roughly the same size, so everything should fit. She pulled out the dress in a see-through dry cleaning bag. "Go change into this, no one will recognize you." "I wish y'd told me we were updating her wardrobe," Gloria said. Alice stuck her tongue out but went into the depot. "Do we really think he'll leave us alone?" Gloria asked. "Alice will be safe," Ken said. "Then that's enough for tonight," Terry said, though she caught Ken's frown. "What is it?" "I'm not sure." "Then keep it to yourself." Vague psychic pronouncements would not help Terry's state of mind. Standing opposite Brenner, she'd been very aware that this could have ended another way. Probably best. Ken shrugged. Alice came out of the station with her coveralls over her arm and ducked her head almost shyly. She had on a flowered dress, one of Terry's and Andrew's favorites, that stopped a few inches above the knee, and her work boots. "The shoes," Terry said, and reached into the trunk to find the pair of low black heels. "I almost forgot. You can carry your boots in the bag the dress came in." "You look great," Gloria said. Alice's cheeks were flushed. "From dead to dolled up," Terry said. Alice took the shoes from Terry and walked over to the car to sit on the front passenger seat and change. "You don't think I look silly like a little girl playing dress-up or something?" "No," Terry said, scoffing. "You're beautiful. I feel like Cinderella." "Good thing it's nowhere close to midnight, then," Ken said. Terry hoped Alice did all right in Canada. "It's not forever. Hopefully." There were hugs then and tearful farewells. The bus pulled into the station and it was time for the real goodbye. Terry walked Alice over to the bus with a lump in her throat. She carried the bag with Alice's boots. Alice lugged her suitcase and gave it to the porter to put under the bus. Alice watched him suspiciously and, after he finished, suggested they might want to adjust the bolt tightness on the door or it fall off at some point. Terry waited a few feet from the bus door. "I guess this is it for now," Terry said. Alice hesitated, and Terry could see she was wrestling with herself. "Out with it, Alice. There's something I need to tell you. Something I've seen happen to you. In the future." Gloria said I should give you a choice, to know or not. Alice shifted on her heels. Her expression was completely somber. Whatever she'd seen, it wasn't good. Tell me this, am I still fighting? Terry asked. Still trying to do what's right? Alice answered immediately. Yes. Good. Then I don't need to know. Alice started to protest, but Terry said, I'll let you know if I change my mind. Okay. This Alice accepted. You'll let me know immediately. Okay. And Terry folded her into a hug and watched her friend board the bus. She would never ask anyone to tell her the future again. Maybe. All aboard, Ken called to Gloria and Terry after the bus pulled out and Alice was on her way to Canada. They piled back in the car. Terry was content to let Ken keep driving. I'm going to miss her, Gloria said. Ken and Terry spoke at the same time. Me too. 10. Brenna couldn't believe the Johnson girl had died before they could discover her secrets. And with that electroshock stunt she'd handed Terry Ives away to make him look weak, Carly, upset, had gone straight to sleep, helped by the sedative he'd given her. But he would still win the day. Dr. Parks would get over her fit of conscience. He'd given her the night off and a reminder of their confidentiality protocols. The body had apparently already been taken down to the morgue, so he assumed its secrets would be his. Now he called Langley to get ahead of the news. Director, I wanted to be the first to give you a heads up on a situation we had here this evening, Brenner said. I heard about some alarms, the director said. News travelled fast. False ones of a sort, Brenner said. He related the details of Alice Johnson's death. She'd increased the settings on an electroshock machine herself, triggering a heart attack, and told him that several of the other problem subjects had seen the body and also set off the fire alarm and the gate code. The personnel were being debriefed and given a cover story about a drunk driver crashing through the fencing. By tomorrow, hardly anyone would know the truth, and soon enough everyone who did would forget it. They had medications to help with that if anyone had trouble. All in all, I say we've dodged a bullet, Doctor. Brenner said. They'll clean up our mess for us, for the illusion of being left alone. Let the girl's family mourn. We won't bother them. We'll get what we can from the corpse, though the brain was fried by electricity. Let Terry Ives think she had the upper hand for a brief moment. But don't we need the woman's child? The director asked. I have that well in hand. See that you do. All the approval he needed for the next phase of the evening. It would have been easier to accomplish here, but there was a certain novelty to rearranging his plans to accommodate a disruption, to stepping out into a spotlight and still managing to remain invisible. He gathered his credentials, some hospital scrubs, a fake badge, and got in his car. He shook his head at the torn chain-link gate as he left, a clean-up crew already half done with the mess. There was only one hospital near Larrabee, and it was simple enough to guess that was where Terry would end up before the night was through. The injection should start producing effects soon, if it hadn't already. And so Brenner drove fast. 11. Ken parked Terry's car in the yard and she yawned, sleepy after the events of the evening. Ken's car was parked in the Ives driveway. He and Gloria had driven over together. I'm wired, Ken said. I don't know how you can be tired. I'm with her. Gloria raised her hand in the back. I no longer have a single fantasy about how glamorous and exciting and easy the lives of comic book heroes are. Terry laughed. Do you guys want to come in? A half-hearted invite she prayed they'd refuse, but would also be fine with if they said yes. In other words, real friendship. There are still some brownies, I think. It's been a big night, Gloria said. And you need your baby sleep. Baby sleep? Terry asked. It's like beauty sleep but for healthy babies. Ah. You too, Ken. He stared off into space. After Ken, Terry said. Is there something you need to tell me, or are you ready to call it a night? There's something, but I don't know what it is. He raised his hands. Yes, I do know that's annoying. You don't have to tell me just because Alice is gone. All right, I'm going in. Terry accepted her keys from Ken, who patted her car's hood and said, "Well done, Nellie." She didn't bother to ask what that meant. She waved goodbye and let herself in the front door. She went to the kitchen for a glass of water. Or maybe milk. Were there brownies left? She deserved one. The night had gone as planned. Alice was safe. They were safe. Brenner would leave them alone if he was smart, and she'd find a way to get the word out about what he was doing. So did she feel like darkness gathered at the edges of her vision. Pain ripped through her entire body, centered at her waist. Water ran down her thighs. She grabbed the counter. "Oh," she said. "The baby." She screamed, "Becky, she's coming." A door slammed above and Becky ran down the stairs. "What, your water broke?" She paused. "She early. We have to go. Hospital." Terry felt woozy. "Now?" Becky asked about the damage to the front of Terry's car, and Terry had no explanation. "Just drive," she said. "It's going to be all right," Becky said. "They do a good job at this place." But they both knew it was the same hospital where their parents died. "Faster," Terry said. Every contraction rattled her bones like lightning. Pain. Such pain. Get there. To her credit, Becky did go faster. She slammed on the brakes when they got to the ER drive up, tossing on the hazards and helping Terry out. Terry barely knew where she was. She was in such pain. "She's in labor," Becky shouted. "Help me," Terry said. "Save my baby. Baby Jane has to be okay. Hang in there, baby Jane." Nurses and doctors swamped Terry and steered her onto a gurney. They rushed her into the building, Becky jogging alongside and then disappearing. An Roman 4 drip was inserted in her arm and they said something about pain medicine. The sight of the monitor with the line of her heart spiking and down, was so familiar that for a moment she thought she might be back in the Hawkins lab. "This baby's coming," someone shouted. A team of people was around her, and the scene dissolved into scrubs and masks, beeps, and the clatter of surgeons' tools on a steel tray. The smell of disinfectant. Terry hung on to consciousness for dear life. Every contraction was a knife to the gut, and she prayed for baby Jane and accepted the pain. "One more push," a voice near her said, face behind a mask, and so she did. She pushed for all she was worth. There was a blaze of light in her vision, and then she heard it, the most beautiful sound in heaven or on earth. Jane swelled like a battle cry, ready to tell the world what she thought of it. Jane was here. She's here. Someone was handing a man in scrubs her baby. She knew his eyes, those blue eyes. She had to stop him. "That's my girl." Consciousness slipped through her grasp. "That's my girl." Becky was sitting beside her hospital bed when she came to. "Where is she?" Terry demanded, fighting her way to a sitting position. "Where's Jane?" The stillness in Becky before she answered spoke volumes. "I'm so sorry, Terry. There were complications and they weren't able to save her." "No, I heard her." Terry fought the Roman 4 out of her arm and wrestled Becky to get to her feet. "You don't understand. I saw him. He took her. He took Jane." "Terry, no. There's no baby. You have to listen to me." But no one would listen to Terry. Her baby was alive. Alive. And she would find a way to prove it. "Just put her in it, doctor." Brenner told the nurse who oversaw the child's care. I could carry her," she corrected, holding the baby as if he was a threat to it. "It's best if I do this alone. Could you wait outside in the hall while I'm in with them?" It wasn't a dignified request, but Nyla was handling the child personally if she spit up or soiled herself. Babies did those things, no matter how much you wished they wouldn't. The nurse ever so slowly lowered the baby into the stroller. Her mostly bald head, with its fuzz and slightly unfocused eyes, waggled around. When would she seem like a person? Patience, he thought. You'll develop it now, one way or another. She's making you. If anyone could, it would be this subject. To underscore who was in charge, he pushed the stroller forward, motioning for the nurse to open the door. She held it, fluttering her fingers at the child. as if a child so young could understand anything except its own biological imperatives: sleep, eat, defecate, sleep more, eat more, repeat. But someday she would be his crowning achievement. 8 had no idea, but the baby was kept only 2 locked doors away from her. One with a more sophisticated keypad, the other with only a simple lock opening into a room outfitted as a nursery. She'd been desultory and throwing fits for months, and Brenner had stopped visiting her again unless it was absolutely necessary. He had what he needed to bring her back around, and now, finally, it was time for them to meet. All would be forgiven. According to the nurse, the baby would be ready to play soon enough. That would be good for both girls. Had already directed the nursery to be painted with bright colors that 8 would approve of. "This is it, doctor," Brenner said, steering the wheels over the tile. The nurse opened the door to 8's room. When she started to follow him through, he said, "Wait in the hall, please." She warily eyed the stroller, but remained where she was told. 8 was on the top bunk, staring at the ceiling. He noticed she'd drawn up there a rainbow with her colored pencils. Maybe he'd suggest that for the playroom. She'd finally drawn something, at least. She'd stared at the ceiling far too much lately. Or so he'd been told. "Look what I've brought," Brenner announced. "Your new baby sister." The girl could move, he'd give her that. 8 tossed herself off the bed, landing on her feet, and raced to the edge of the stroller where she pulled up short. She looked down into it, almost shy, nervous. "This is 11, doctor," Brenner said. 11, 8 considered, looking at her hands. "I'd have to count her on toes, too. Does that mean 9 and 10? I hear 5 and 6 more. This is your friend, 11. He frowned at her. "That's all you need to know. She's too little to be a friend. She'll be bigger someday, and she'll be like you." Absorbing that, 8 leaned over the basket to examine the wriggling baby, and at last he heard her whisper, "I'll watch over you, baby 11. She looked up at him with a grin. "Can I help take care of her? Nurse can teach you how to play safely with her. Would you like that? We'll be friend family," she sang. 8 and 11 sisters. Of sorts, he thought. As long as it serves my purposes. He wondered if Terry Ives was still babbling to her sister and any reporter who'd listen about how he'd stolen her child. The child was his. She should listen to him when he told her. Terry sat on the bench in the park and waited. It was a nice day, and Gloria had suggested the meeting place. Terry knew it was because she thought the fresh air would do her good. She'd spent a lot of time alone after the hospital, trying to convince Becky of what she knew. Calling reporters, trying to get more leads on who Brenner had been before he came here. Brenner had stolen her child. She knew it, but she couldn't get anyone to listen. It had gotten hard to go outside, and she remembered why now. Sitting out here, it would be easy to forget the darkness that hid nearby. She wouldn't walk in the light, not regularly, until she had her child at her side to walk with her. True to his word that night, other than stealing her baby, Brenner hadn't summoned anyone